This is Capital Games. I am the Wiz. Today, I am going to talk about my sales projections for the Resident Evil 4 Remake. It is coming out tomorrow, which is this Friday. It's Thursday when I'm recording this, so it's going to be interesting to see what happens here. So let's get started with what I think the sales projections are going to be for this title. So let's get into some background here. I think we all know, if you're a gamer, you all know what Resident Evil 4 is. Resident Evil 4 is a game that came out on the GameCube and PS2 a while back that revolutionized how third-person action combat, specifically shooting, was done. Without Resident Evil 4, there wouldn't have been a Gears of War, there wouldn't have been a bunch of these other third-person shooters with the over-the-shoulder style shooting mechanics that you see nowadays. So it is an important game, not only in the way that it shaped the industry, but it's also a fantastic game on top of that. It garnered a ton of great reviews, and as time went on, it sold pretty well, but that's as time went on, and I'll explain how that happened. So the anticipation for this remake has been long coming, and right now it looks like, if we look at reviews, it's really starting to shape up to be something special yet again. So why don't we start diving into my thoughts as to what I think the sales are going to be for Resident Evil 4 Remake. We should start off with one of the more important things, well, not the most important thing, but one of the important things, and that is the reviews right now. I believe the embargo was lifted on Sunday or Monday, and the reviews have been flying, and they've been incredibly positive. If I'm looking at OpenCritic right now for the Resident Evil 4 Remake, it is at a mighty rating with 92 a top critic average, with 97% of critics recommending. That is a huge number. Very few games reach to that point, which, again, is not surprising considering the title that it's remaking, but a lot of people were a little concerned. Even though the other two remakes that they've done of 2 and 3 were really good, they were still concerned that this might flub up, because there are some things about Resident Evil 4 that were really special but really quirky at the time that were really indicative of the time it was made. So, and I'm looking at the reviews right now, a bunch of 10 out of 10s. We have an 80 out of 10, of course. We have 4.5 out of 5 stars, but a lot of perfect scores on this. So the critics are really happy with how this turned out. So that's a 92 top critic average with 97% of critics recommending. So right there is what a lot of gamers, even though they say they don't care what critics think, when they see this, they feel more compelled to purchase the game right away. So then you have that sales potential rising up and up and up. So let's get into the sales total when it comes to the Resident Evil series. Resident Evil is interesting when it comes to their sales, because a lot of their titles sell pretty well, but I think you'd be surprised which are the ones that actually sold the best in certain aspects. I mean, if we're looking at the sales right now, let's look at the top 5 in sales when it comes to Resident Evil. Total, we're looking at total here. So we're looking at the best-selling Resident Evil looks to be Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which got 11.7 million units sold. And then we have Resident Evil 2 Remake, which got 11.2 million units sold. We have the original Resident Evil 5, which was on PS3 and Xbox 360. That got a sales of 8.6 million. Resident Evil 6 also got 8.6 million. That's the derived version that apparently no one really likes. I haven't played it. I'm not really interested in either. And then the 5th one is Resident Evil Village, which is the PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X, and that got 7.4 million units. So what you're seeing right here is the remake of Resident Evil 2 sold really well, another beloved Resident Evil game. But if we look at what sales tell us here, is that Resident Evil 4 is not in the top 5. Now, some of you point out, and correctly, that if we do it in a total sense, what the total amount of sales are when it comes to Resident Evil 4, it probably reaches somewhere in between Resident Evil 7 and Resident Evil 2 Remake. I believe that's the case in that case, but you might be correct on that. But here's the thing with Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4 got a lot of people to keep rebuying the game. Resident Evil 4 was ported to so many different systems. We're looking at PS2 and GameCube is where it started. Then there was the Wii version, and then there was the 360 PS3 version, and then there's the PS4 Xbox One version. And this is the type of game that is so beloved that people who were fans of it were going to keep buying it for the upgraded versions. I remember specifically what I did was I bought it on GameCube when it first came out and adored it. And then I got the Wii version when the whole Wii craze was going on. And I think the last version I bought was on PC, which is the HD version. And that's the last time I bought Resident Evil 4. But yeah, I'm one of them. I've rebought that game a bunch of times in this point. So that's not a surprise to me. So I think a lot of the sales for Resident Evil 4 were really due to constant reselling of the title, which gave it all that boost in total sales. It's still impressive. Don't get me wrong. It is still an impressive number that game has. But when people decide to take the total amount of sales it has throughout its time, it really shows an incorrect light as to exactly how popular the game is. Now, Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 3 remakes have sold very well. We're looking at, again, Resident Evil 2 Remake got 11.2 million when it comes to sales. And if we're looking at Resident Evil 3 Remake, it got 6.4. Now, because Resident Evil 4 is such a beloved title, people are thinking that it might actually be the best-selling of all time. And I don't think that's not possible. It is certainly possible to do that. But I don't think it reaches to where Resident Evil 2 is, to be completely honest with you. I'm looking at between Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 5, and I am thinking 10 million is probably is where it's going to reach, specifically when it comes to sales on this. I'm using these sales figures from Gematsu, which are sales figures that are taken from Capcom as of the tail end of last year, which is December 31st, 2022. So this is straight out of Capcom here. And I think generally that will be the sales numbers that you're going to see for Resident Evil 4 Remake total when it comes to the total amount of sales it makes. Could it beat those? It could. It definitely could. And the way that I think it might do it is if it comes out really strong out of the gate. I believe, I read somewhere, I don't have it on me right now, but from what I remember reading, the one game that sold the most the first week in sales, units of sales, was Resident Evil 5, and that was, I believe, 3 million in the first month. If Resident Evil 4 has a shot to beat in unit sales, it would have to reach 5 million in its first month. Like, easy. If it reached 5 million in its first month with the strong reviews and get good sales coming out of there, then I could see it reaching over 10 million. But as of this point, I don't see it making 5 million. I could see it doing 3 million in the first month, but I don't see it doing 5. I think by end of year it will do 5 million. But if you then take into consideration, like, people already have Dead Space. They have, Dead Space may have taken a bit of the thunder away from Resident Evil 4, even though Resident Evil 4, I think, is the more beloved game. But Dead Space, I think, is a more, how do I put this? I think it's one that can sell a little bit better than Resident Evil 4 by the looks of it on its own. Unless the reputation of Resident Evil 4 is that big, that maybe it can do a lot better. But I think some are satisfied with Dead Space to a certain extent. I might be wrong, but I think first month it will reach 3 million. I think it will sell really well. All right, I think Resident Evil 4 Remake will sell really well, and it will reach 3 million in the first month, 5 million by the end of the year, and then at total sales it'll be about 10 million. But if it does reach 5 million in the first month, then yes, it is more than possible it might be the best-selling Resident Evil game of all time. That is certainly a possibility. And with the critical reception, it certainly is a possibility. But I really, at this point, don't see it unless it really outperforms that sales projection of 3 million. And it could very well. But yeah, there is my opinion on that. So that is it for the sales projection of Resident Evil 4 Remake. What do you think? Well, how do you think this game will sell? Will it reach higher than Resident Evil 7 Biohazard, which is 11.7 million units sold? Or will it go in between where I think, which is probably where Resident Evil 2 and Resident Evil 5 is, which is, I think, going to be around the 10 million mark. What do you think? Leave a comment down below what your thoughts are on that. Tomorrow is going to be the weekly dividend. I'm not sure what I'm playing for the weekly dividend for tomorrow. We're going to talk about a lot of what's happened throughout the week. There's a bunch of interesting stories that happened, so it's going to be very interesting to talk about things that have been also announced and some news reports that have been going on. So tune in for that. So until next time, I am The Wiz. This is Capital Games. Talk to you next time. Bye.